where am I this time? This is also not my bookshelf. I am actually at my parents' house. I am pet sitting their fish while they are on a second part of the road trip. And I also am in process of moving. So next week you are going to see, hopefully, probably next week. There will be a video next week. But you will see a new setup for me. So that'll be exciting. Hey y'all, it's Becky here from the Beckisphere, where we talk about climate news and solutions. You've entered the weekly climate recap. Oh, it's not weekly anymore. Every other week, I do a climate recap where I basically cover what is happening in the news to talk about reducing the impacts of and preparing for climate change. So if that sounds like something that would be interesting to you for just regular updates, I highly recommend hitting that subscribe button below, because I'm here for you every other week when it comes to that kind of stuff, as well as some other things in the mix, of course. By the way, if you see me looking down here, I have my iPad because there's a lot of information to cover and this helps me. Okay. Back to the video. This week we are going to talk about the news from September 24th to October 7th. So let's go ahead and get right into it. An energy crisis is looming in Europe and in Asia as we head towards winter. And prices for methane, which was formerly known on this channel as natural gas, but we're calling it methane, calling it like I see it. The prices of methane have already gone all the way up to 6 times higher in Europe than they were this time of year in 2019, and 4 times higher in Asia. So I'm going to actually do a short separate video talking about the energy crisis, because I decided that in order to make these videos a little shorter, since I'm covering 2 weeks now, and also to dive a little deeper into topics, there's going to be little news bits from the recap that I think I want to cover a little more in depth. So those will be separate short videos that will come up next week, which is why hopefully you'll see my new background in one of those. But bottom line, there's an energy crisis right now, and I will cover it for you more next week, but there are some links in below if you want to check it out beforehand. In a somewhat related note, many cities in northeast China went dark. Immediately, popular commentators blamed it on the move towards renewable energy, which sounds like a Texas deja vu. But this idea was unfortunately echoed by CSC's Financials, which is a Chinese investment bank. So thanks. In reality, though, the blackouts were primarily caused by soaring coal prices and high electrical demand for factories bouncing back from COVID. The higher prices are from reducing the mining production due to safety and anti-grafting incidents. And China has also had less access to coal recently because they were in a diplomatic disagreement with Australia and are now sanctioning Australian coal. But many people do want to blame it on the transition because of factory closures, which put people out of work. The World Health Organization, or WHO, updated its air quality guidelines for the first time in 16 years. They say air quality is the largest environmental threat to human health next to climate change, so they're kind of tied, and causes 7 million premature deaths a year. That's a lot. The new guidelines tighten standards for nitrogen dioxide, 2 types of particulate matter, ozone, and carbon monoxide. But it actually loosens the standards on sulfur dioxide. So that's interesting. Climate change is fueling a migration crisis in Guatemala, as 1/5 of the population are facing dangerously high levels of food insecurity following a terrible drought and extreme storms and hurricanes. They have got it all. Crops can't grow in such extreme environment. So many are trying to flee to the United States, but the United States is rejecting them at the border. Chile, Denmark, the UK, France, Germany, Montenegro, and Sri Lanka have agreed to stop building new coal plants. Quote, moving away from coal is not a death knell for industrialization, but rather a much better opportunity for green jobs. There's 2 books out right now, big name books. There's Katherine Hayhoe's book called Saving Us, and you can check out the Climate Pods episode that they interviewed her on. There's also the Regeneration book by Paul Hawkins, who made the famous book Drawdown. Don't worry, I already have both of those. You'll probably see them in the back of a future bookshelf background because that's not going away. I'm excited to read them, and I will let you know what I think because I don't have time to do a book club, but I have some ideas. The EPA issued a new rule to sharply drop the amount of hydrofluorocarbons on the market, also known as HFCs. China also announced that they would join the effort to curb HFCs and outright ban HFC 23. This is actually another topic that I'm going to make a short video on because there's a lot to it, and it's very interesting. Like, what are HFCs 23? HFC 23. We'll find out. California Governor Gavin Newsom signed a $15 billion package to fight wildfires, drought, and climate change in general. The largest amount of the bill is set to go to drought relief projects and expand to the state's water supply, which I'm not sure how you do that. I guess desalination and that kind of thing. Some money will go towards reducing wildfire risk, some with greening urban spaces, preparing for sea level rise, and decreasing climate impact of the agricultural industry, and electrifying public school buses and other state transportation vehicles. Quote, at the end of the day, we have to deal with the realities of climate change that are here right now. We can't afford to sit back passively and watch the debate unfold in Washington, D.C. Hydropower dropped 49% last year in Canada due to drought. Nationally, hydropower is expected to provide 14% less power this year compared to 2020. So if it was 49% last year, yikes. In other California news, an oil pipeline offshore of Orange County gashed somehow and has been leaking oil since October 2nd, if not earlier. That was just when it was earliest reported. It's not known yet how the pipeline got moved over 100 feet and gashed, but the running hypothesis is an anchor in the wrong spot. It took over 12 hours for Amplify Energy to report the pipeline spill. It spilled 126 to 144,000 gallons into the local environment, polluting multiple beaches and a wetland with oil and killing tons of birds and marine life. Quote, the oil has infiltrated the entirety of the Talbert wetlands. There's significant impacts to wildlife here. These are wetlands that we've been working with the Army Corps of Engineers, with a local land trust, with all the community wildlife partners to make sure to create this beautiful natural habitat for decades. And now in just a day, it's completely destroyed. This is by no means the largest oil spill in the West Coast's history, but it further reiterates how badly we need to move away from this form of energy generation. Multiple philanthropy organizations combined their efforts to devote $5 billion to the 30 by 30 concept, which is a goal to preserve 30% of wildlife and habitat onshore and offshore by 2030. Montana settled with its indigenous groups for $1.9 billion to improve their water quality in reservations. This is similar to the recent win by First Nations in Canada, who were going through the same problem despite being in one of the most water-rich countries in the world. This is because when Europeans built the US and Canada, they put the federal governments in charge of water infrastructure on reservations. And because people living there couldn't fix their own pipes or filters, they had to rely on the slow and neglectful governments to do that process. And as a result, pipes rusted and water was polluted by nearby industries, and indigenous people had to basically pay for bottled water to be shipped whenever they needed clean water to drink. So you can learn more about the stories below, but it was a very big win for Montana's indigenous groups to be able to have more access to clean drinking water. Germany has a new chancellor, and the Social Democrat Party narrowly beating out Angela Merkel's Christian Democrat Party, earning 25.7% of the vote. The Green and Free Democrat parties have also gotten more room in the parliament. This might be a good move for the environment, as the Social Democrat Party is more progressive in that area. Though from my understanding, I thought Merkel did a pretty good job preparing Germany for being more climate friendly. Any German watchers out there, let me know what you think about that. I haven't followed closely enough to her policies to know, but she seems like one of the decent ones. The new chancellor, Olaf Scholz, had this to say, quote, "The mandate for us is to do what the people want." He added, saying, "To lead a good government that will set the course for the decade ahead, to bring more respect into society, to modernize our industrial sector, and to halt the man-made climate change." COP26 organizers removed oil companies Shell and BP from their principal partners list after they got a lot of backlash for having them on the list by environmental groups. They said that fossil fuel companies will have a minimal role to play in the conference since they don't have any science-based plans to reduce their emissions. Australia's Prime Minister and China's president are both threatening not to attend COP26. Australia is the world's largest coal exporter and the highest per capita CO2 emitter among the world's richest countries. And we know what in China's, the world's largest emitter, not historical, that's the US, but they're the current largest emitter. And we also are not sure if India's prime minister will be going yet either. He has not RSVP'd yet. Australia would be disappointing, but frankly not really that surprising, because the prime minister has had a long history with the coal industry. And I feel like either coal will need to become no longer economically viable, or they'll have to have some sort of election, whichever comes first. As an example, the country already approved a third new coal mine expansion in a month. China would be incredibly disappointing. So would India. But this is what the COP26 president had to say about the Chinese president and his lack of RSVP. Quote, "What President Xi Jinping has said is that they are going to strictly restrict the use of coal in this next 5-year period. From 2026, they're going to phase down. But we want to see the detail of that. They have said to me that they want the COP26 to be a success. The ball is in their court. We want them to come forward and make it a success together with the rest of the world." To decrease the number of people living in flood zones around the US, starting October 1st, the government dropped a lot of subsidies for coastal homes. So the people that are living in those coastal homes, they're really starting to feel the true premium of living in a flood zone. This can threaten the value of people's homes, particularly in places like Florida. A new paper by researchers from Carnegie Mellon University found that increased use of individual Ubers and Lyft rides could actually result in higher commute emissions. They simulated 6 cities using more ride sourcing services and found that using more Ubers and Lyfts increases gas consumption by 20%, and increases congestion, crashes, and noises by 60%. And this honestly makes sense, because if you think about like the commute that the driver has to take from person A to person B's location, you don't have to do that with a car. The researchers also found that if Ubering and Lyfting kicked out public transit, that it would increase the external cost of travel by 30 to 35%, unless those rides are zero emissions, in which case it would actually drop the cost by 16 to 17%. Again, this is all having to do with individual travel. So if we're talking about more ride shares, then the numbers would be different, and it might actually be a beneficial thing. Now, the only good thing about incorporating ride hauling services is that it actually decreases air pollution, and that's because a lot of air pollution is made when we just start up our car. So they found that it would be 60% less air pollution in places that had more Ubers and Lyfts, specifically nitric oxides, particulate matter, or PM 2.5, and volatile organic compounds, or VOCs, because fewer cars would be cold starting. I'll link their paper in the source section below. It was quite interesting. Bike sharing services are actually pretty good. City Bike in New York saved the equivalent of 13,370 tons of oil and reduced CO2 emissions by 30,070 tons over the first 3 years of operations. I think biking is a great thing for a city instead of cars, or maybe the small little scooter things. Those are cool. I like those. A new study that got a lot of attention, probably because it's so damn depressing, looked at how many more heat waves the alpha generation would experience compared to their grandparents, which would be about baby boomer Gen X folk would be the grandparents. The paper found that kids born last year, 2020, will experience 7 times more heat waves, 3 times more crop failures and floods, and twice as much drought and wildfires than their grandparents that were born in 1960. This is the global average too, though. So in some places, the disparity is stark, and like Africa and the Middle East, where drought is going to be much more than just twice as much. Urban heating has tripled in the last 30 years, according to a new academic study. This is particularly due to climate change and population growth in urban areas. And as you can see, the hottest areas are predominantly in Asia. NASA launched a new United Launch Alliance Atlas V rocket called Landsat 9, intended to aid in collecting climate change related data such as urban area growth, glacial melt, and cropland health. Ford is clearly working on just being the tippity top of the electric vehicle revolution. They are building enormous facilities in Tennessee and Kentucky that will put 11,000 people to work. They're also investing in a US-based battery supply chain so that the US won't have to keep importing them from Asia. So it's more domestic reliance. And as I said in a previous recap, they're going to eventually work on making a closed loop system for batteries so that we don't have to keep mining for new materials. Meanwhile, General Motors launched a new electric delivery truck division called Bright Drop to make EV410. They're hoping to have EV410 be in production by 2023, with the first client in mind being FedEx. They previously unveiled the EV600, which will already hit the road this year, possibly just narrowly beating out a delivery truck being built by Rivian that's also supposed to come out this year. Overall, this is the amount of electric vehicles that we currently have in the US. Enbridge announced that it has finished upgrading the controversial Line 3 pipeline and has now begun flowing crude oil through it for about a week. This pipeline has long been protested against by environmental groups and indigenous people alike because it violates treaty rights and threatens the water supply of the local area where tribes grow wild harvest rice, and of course it also contributes to the climate change causing industry. DC, 21 states, and multiple cities are urging the EPA to rewrite car emissions rules to make them stricter. Quote, "There is no need to wait to require further deployment of these technologies or to delay the massive economic and public health benefits of reducing these emissions." The American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy and General Motors also support this push. West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin and Arizona Senator Kyrsten Sinema have still been holding out on the spending bill, which would be a big climate boost for the country and the world. The Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, has decided to go ahead with the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which was previously tied together with the spending bill in order to get both of them passed. But she's going ahead with the infrastructure package so they can get something done. One of the parts of the spending bill that Manchin has expressed disinterest in is the Clean Electricity Performance Program, or CEPP, which is honestly one of the most important parts of the freaking package because it basically guides utility companies to reduce the amount of fossil fuel energy that they get. And that would basically decrease the country's emissions by 80% by 2035, I think it was. So it's huge. Manchin thinks that this will undermine the power system's reliability. To help Manchin better understand the benefits of the program, 21 energy experts from around the country penned a letter to him to explain that it will be a step forward for the country's energy industry. Quote, "We are writing to express our confidence that our nation's power system reliability can be preserved and enhanced with the Clean Electricity Performance Program in the legislative package now under consideration in Congress. As experts in the electricity industry, we believe that this sector must continue to lead the country in achieving both climate mitigation objectives and a reliable, resilient, secure, and affordable energy system." A new startup plans to help speed up reforestation to fight climate change, predominantly in areas that had recently been impacted by wildfires. Called Drone Seed, it has already raised $36 million in Series A funding. Quote, "Drone Seed is the only company approved by the FAA to deploy a fleet of heavy lift drones to reforest after wildfires, enabling healthy forests to grow back. The drones are equipped with seed packets and dispensers, and the drones will plant them in certain areas after they have determined the best location for that seed to go. And the company sells carbon credits based on the areas that they help reforest, which they're able to do 6 times as fast as human operations. A new report finds that Texas oil and gas operations, such as the Railroad Commission of Texas, are making money off of oil and gas industries. That doesn't sound conflicting at all. For example, the Railroad Commission Chair Christy Craddock cast a deciding vote in favor of a pipeline company recently and in return received $22,500 in campaign contributions from that company. Very subtle, guys. Unfortunately, this may actually be legal, so the authors are basically suggesting that they need to push for better laws. Quote, "We think it's time to take money out of decisions that are made at the state's agency. Oklahoma has a pretty simple, clear-cut rule that their oil and gas commissioners can't have any interest in the business that they are making decisions about." The Norwegian government announced that the country's sovereign wealth fund is committing to making sure that all companies in their portfolio are targeting net zero emissions by 2050. The fund is the largest public stockholder in the world, representing 1/10 of the world's wealth funds and 1.5% of the world's stocks. Norway is a confusing country because 98% of its energy comes from renewable energy, which is great, but 18% of its GDP and 68% of its exports come from exporting fossil fuels. My dudes. So hopefully this is a step in the right direction for them to align their wallet with their values. According to a new study by the International Monetary Fund, fossil fuel companies are making $11 million in global subsidies every minute. Most are going to oil, the second most being coal, and not that much is going to gas comparatively, but still more than the rest of the electricity grid. The India-based EV ride-hailing startup BlueSmart received $25 million in its Series A funding. BP Ventures supplied $13 million of that, and one of their managing partners will chair on BlueSmart's board. BlueSmart has already started in New Delhi, and they intend to expand to 5 other cities. BP has also acquired, okay, so is BP Ventures the same thing as BP? I need to double check that. I'm pretty sure it's the same company. BP Ventures is a part of BP. Does that make sense? I'm pretty sure that's true, but I just am not completely confident on that. But anyway, so the first one has to do with BP Ventures. This one has to do with BP, just because I thought they were put together. BP has acquired Blueprint Power, a startup that helps turn buildings into flexible power assets that lower the carbon footprint of commercial real estate. The company offers data services and algorithms aimed at increasing the commercial incentive for building owners to get their buildings greener. The USDA pledges billions to help farmers transition their farming structure to be more sustainable and resilient to drought. A new study found that UK home gas boilers emit more CO2 than the country's power plants combined. Though to fix this is pretty easy, you just need to get an electric one instead, and electrify everything. So if you're in the UK and you are able to and you haven't done so already, definitely do that. The Confederation of British Industry, or CBI, said the installation of new gas boilers should be banned starting in 2025. Another analysis said that insulation in many UK homes are also lacking, with installation of insulation having plummeted by 95% between 2012 and 2019. That's a lot. Again, electrify everything, maintain good insulation, get double paned windows. We got this. The U.S. Interior Department announced that it was rolling back a Trump-era rule that made it easier for fossil fuel companies to drill on public lands and federal waters, citing defects. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services declared 23 species extinct, saying that all extinctions were caused by human actions such as habitat destruction and climate change. The EPA's Energy Star certification no longer gives out its most efficient rating to gas appliances. Quote, "This is the first time the federal agency is recognizing that there's not a place for gas applications in a clean energy future." Cities around the U.S. are working on moving towards a greener energy supply, but partisan efforts called preemption are blocking a lot of cities from being able to make their own energy decisions and quit methane. This year's Nobel Prize in Physics went to 3 scientists whose names I will put up on the screen because I can't pronounce them, for their work in predicting global warming and understanding the complex physical systems. All the scientists are between the ages of upper 70s and lower 90s. McDonald's announced it's committed to net zero emissions by 2050, joining UN Race to Zero and the Science Based Targets Initiative. This means moving towards operating 100% on clean energy, yes, but also for striving for regenerative agriculture, a circulatory economy, and sustainable packaging. And those were their words, not mine, so that might sound nice, considering they are one of the few fast food places that still don't have a single vegetarian option. The International Air Transport Association announced it plans to get the international air transport industry to reach zero emissions by 2050, placing an emphasis on sustainable aviation and zero carbon fuels, as well as carbon offsetting. A DSMOC analysis found that 2/3 of online posts from 6 major European fossil fuel companies are completely greenwashing themselves. These companies are Royal Dutch Shell, Total Energies, Repsol, Eni, Fortum, and Preem. The worst offenders are Preem and Shell. Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Minnesota, and Wisconsin are joining forces to build a network of electric vehicles in the Midwest. Their group is called the Regional Electric Vehicle Midwest Coalition, or REV. The U.S. envoy John Kerry started a group with different industry heads, industries that are all pretty dirty, such as shipping, cement, and commodification. They're called the First Movers Coalition, and they will work with the U.S. State Department and the World Economic Forum to find the best low-carbon options. Google has been busy recently at making it easier for people to make informed decisions about their travel emissions. They also announced that they would no longer allow climate deniers to make money through ads. This decision includes YouTube, so hey, that's kind of cool. Quote, "We've heard directly from a growing number of our advertising and publisher partners who have expressed concerns about ads that run alongside or promote inaccurate claims about climate change. Advertisers don't want their ads to appear next to this content, and publishers and creators don't want ads promoting these claims to appear on their pages or videos." And that was the climate recap from September 24th to October 7th. Until next time, remember to talk about climate change every single day and to support your local news organizations. Thank you very much for my patrons for supporting my channel and the work that I do. If you would be interested in becoming a Patreon, go ahead and check out the link in the source section. Nope, it's below. A special shout out to the climate courageous and climate confident folks, David H., Vitus Fang, and FK. And Norman Anal.